Scott Peterson has written extensively about Iran. His book, Let the Swords Encircle Me, was named one of the best books of 2010 by Publishers Weekly. He's also the Istanbul bureau chief for the Christian Science Monitor, and he joins us now from Istanbul, which is, of course, in Turkey. Thanks very much for joining us. First of all, what do you make of the recent shenanigans in the Strait of Hormuz and the bellicose sabre rattling?
Well, I think that you've summed it up pretty well by using the word shenanigans and also saber rattling. I mean, very little has changed, in fact, in the past 10 days in terms of the strategic balance in the Gulf. I don't think that there are any Iranian capabilities, for example, that were revealed to American commanders or those who in the United States might be watching very closely what Iran is trying to show off here. And I think likewise the very strong rhetoric that we've heard from the Iranians also has kind of fluctuated. We've seen some very strong things, suggestions, even threats that they might close the Straits of Hormuz. But then you also hear Iranian commanders say, no, that's not really their plan. So really mixed messages, but very little strategic change on the ground in the Gulf.
You know, there are some observers who would say that, however, given the current volatile temperature in the region, that anything small, such as an accident happening, could escalate the situation because of these statements that are being made and America retaliating verbally and saying that it will do everything to keep the strait open. I mean, how tense is the region right now?
Well, I think the region is very tense in a lot of ways, but of course this is the kind of rhetorical flourish that we've seen both from the Iranians and from the American side over the years, and so, you know, really the markets, for example, haven't in the Gulf. They were open today, even though it was a bank holiday in the UK, and even though American markets weren't open, you know, in the Gulf, there was very little reaction, and that would be the first place, of course, that would see any real, real reaction if, in fact, a conflict were to start. So they seem to be calculating that this rhetoric isn't going to lead to actual conflict, but you're absolutely right to point out that the biggest risk is an accident occurring or some unforeseen, unpredictable event taking place that really brings both sides to a head, or something happens that just happens between ships. This is a very close area where you have a lot of American ships. You also have a lot of Iranian ships and many other navies that are operating in the Persian Gulf, and a lot at stake with 1/6 of the world's oil flowing through there. So really, this is probably the biggest concern is something unexpected happening.
Well, let me ask you about Iran's very close relationship with Syria and, of course, its close relationship with Hezbollah in Lebanon. And to what extent do you think Iran would be prepared to go to keep Bashar al-Assad in power? And to what extent do you think that there might be repercussions elsewhere if he is really brought down to the wire?
Well, I think we cannot underestimate how far Iran would go to keep Bashar al-Assad in power. Syria is an absolutely crucial linchpin for Iran's ability to exert soft power throughout the region, and also to claim that its revolution from 1979 is a pan-Islamic revolution, not just a Persian Shiite revolution, but one that really encompasses resistance movements across the Arab world. And I think in that sense, Syria plays a crucial role. Hezbollah, of course, and a very important tool in that regard. And the loss of Syria, I don't think we can underestimate how much harm that would do to Iran's strategic outlook in the region.
And how do you view the status of the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad? How secure is he domestically?
He is under attack in ways that I think no conservative president has been under attack in the last 32 years of the Islamic Republic's existence. In fact, he has proven himself to be the most divisive president that Iran has had. He has created huge numbers of enemies throughout the conservative ranks in Iran. And here we're not even talking about opponents on the reformist side, those who would oppose him on ideological grounds, but more those who are simply not liking the way that he runs the country, the way he has become a very imperious president in some respects, and really taken on Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, in many respects. So, you know, while Ahmadinejad has brought a lot to Iran in some respects, in terms of, over the last several years, the respect of Iran in the region, he's also been a very serious hot potato for the regime as well, in terms of some of the drawbacks, some of the criticisms, and those, I think, are coming home and damaging him domestically a lot. He may not survive his term. Really?
I mean, that's quite a strong thing to say. I want to know, I mean, how much in unison or from the same hymn sheet, so to speak, if I can use mixed metaphors with a Muslim country, do the authorities in Iran sing?
Could you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering, how disparate are the various strands of authority in Iran, or do they speak with one voice?
Well, they don't speak with one voice, and that really is the problem, because on one side you've got the supreme leader, who really has been, of course, occupying a post that has been supreme for 32 years. Ahmadinejad is a president who has pushed up most against that supreme authority more than any other president during these 32 years. And many people, other elements within the leadership, these various centers of power that exist inside Iran, they are ones who have been concerned about that, felt that the supreme leader's authority was actually being eroded by this president. And of course, this president, some of his followers and some of his closest aides have spoken about a very different kind of an ideology from those that have been espoused over the last 32 years. We've spoken about an Iranian Islam, something that is a much more nationalistic version, which is really contrary to a lot of the key pillars of this 1979 revolution. So all of those things are at play right now. And of course, Iran also is coming up close to parliamentary elections due next March, and then this coming a year from now, presidential vote too.
So, you know, we've talked about Iran, the Strait of Hormuz, the Syrian situation, the security or otherwise of Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. We haven't mentioned the nuclear negotiations that have been taking place on and off. Where do you see those going? And as we head into 2012 and we start 2012, it really doesn't look a particularly stable situation in many facets of Iranian diplomacy or foreign affairs.
Well, that's right. And you're right to point out that the nuclear talks especially have been fallow. Nothing has happened really for a year. In fact, the last talks took place last spring here in Istanbul. They completely failed. Iran put forward some very critical preconditions before the talks were even going to start. I was briefed at that time by Iranians, by the American side, and also by the European Union. And basically, there was simply not a framework that would enable a future set up talks that would be worthwhile. So the fact that just in the last day or two now we've had Iran's chief nuclear negotiator say that Iran is open to talks again, I'm not sure that either the Europeans or the Americans are going to be willing to sit down at the table with Iran again unless they really see some kind of a change, something more strategic coming from the Iranian side. And so far we haven't heard anything different from Iran.
A final question. Do you see the status quo vis-a-vis Iran holding by the time this year is out?
Well, this is a very good question. You know, every single significant political event that's taken place in Iran in the last 15 years has been completely unpredictable. I don't know what could happen in the coming years. Anyone who knows Iran well knows that you would never make a prediction about any aspect of the politics or the culture there. So, I mean, we could see dramatic change taking place in the week. If something happens to the supreme leader, something happens to President Ahmadinejad, or to the two former presidential candidates that are now under house arrest. Anything like that could completely change the political dynamic. But that said, we could also see Iran, this regime, holding on for 5 more years or 10 more years in the same, with the very same dynamic, the same structure.
All right, a lot of unanswered questions, but a lot of flashpoints as well. Scott Peterson is at Istanbul. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.